Excellent. Good evening and welcome to the March 8th, 2023 Landlord Tenant Commission virtual meeting. My name is Chris Wimbush. I'm the Vice Chair of the TLC, and I'll be chairing this meeting this evening. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few specifics to orient everyone to our virtual environment. Audio of today's meeting is available through Teams and by phone. If commissioners, presenters, or speakers lose internet connectivity during today's meeting, please try to reconnect with us by phone. For those joining us through Microsoft Teams, please keep your phones and devices muted until you are called upon. Please turn off sound to any other device around you to minimize interference. When called to speak, you must unmute yourself by clicking the microphone icon that is located on your meeting command bar. If you are dialing in by phone, press *6 to unmute. Neither I or county team members have the ability to unmute you. Commissioners, if you wish to recognize to speak, please use your video, turn on your video, or to raise your virtual hand. Public speakers will be called upon by county staff at an assigned time, and your comment will take place within the same time frame as would be at an in-person meeting. Both speakers and organizations will have 3 minutes to speak, but I do not believe we have any public speakers signed up today. A speaking timer will be displayed on screen by staff. If you're dialed in by phone and unable to see the screen, we will provide you with an audible warning when 30 seconds are remaining. The meeting chat is only active for presenters or commissioners in need of technical assistance. The meeting chat should not be used for discussion, public comment, questions about agenda items, or requests for more information. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public testimony period. Lastly, this is a public meeting. All information associated with today's meeting, whether spoken or written, is subject to the Freedom of Information Act's requirements. On the agenda today is public comment, of which no one has signed up, but I'll ask if there's any public comment before we get started. A presentation of the Regional Fair Housing Plan by our county housing staff. If we have achieved quorum, we will have approval of the February meeting minutes. Then moving on to chair's reports, subcommittee updates, and any announcements or staff and member reports.
Chris, excuse
Yes.
me, I'm sorry. Can we hold a minute, please? Let's just double check about a quorum, please. I'm being told that, because we do not have a quorum, we may have to hold off. So we do need to.
Okay.
Wait until.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm the rule follower here, and we are supposed to have a quorum to have a commission meeting. So I understand that Kirit is on his way, and that will make a quorum. Is that correct?
That remind me, quorum for if we're 8. I think we're 8 members with 2 vacancies.
So then
we're actually 9 members with 2 vacancies.
So how many people are here? If you have 5, you're fine then, right?
3. Can I have all commissioners to turn their cameras on briefly? I just want to make sure I'm not missing anyone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, we're at 5. Okay.
Then carry on. Sorry for the interruption.
No worries. Okay. Excellent. So let's move forward with. Is there anyone who would like to provide public comment who have not signed up already, or have not signed up through our online form? Hearing none. And I will just note for the record the attendance of the following commissioners: Julio, Emily, Matt, Chris Wimbush, and Ryan, so that we have a note of that at the start of the meeting. And I will turn things over now for the presentation of the Regional Fair Housing Plan. So we can go have the regional plan team come online and we can go ahead and get started.
Yes, good evening. I'm Joel Franklin, housing planner, working in conjunction with the Council of Governments and our consultant team, who is represented by the Lawyers Committee, Diane Glauber, and the Council of Governments representative who will kick off the presentation is Hillary Chapman.
Excellent. Welcome, Joel, and welcome, Hillary.
Thank you so much for having me. I'll just go ahead and share my screen. Is that the easiest way to do this, Joel, or how would you like to?
Yeah, if you don't mind sharing.
Nope, not at all. All right. I'm gonna okay, great. Well, again, thank you so much, everyone, for the opportunity to be here with you this evening. I really appreciate it. I want to give a special thanks to the Arlington County local government team for their work and being a key part of this process and keeping us moving forward through a multi-year planning process. So I want to just give a quick overview of the what the plan is, what it's hoping to accomplish, and provide a regional perspective. As I said, I am joined here by Diane Glauber, who is the person who took this enormous amount of information that we have gathered and put it into a draft plan that we are hoping to share and get input from you today. And I'm going to cover just a little bit about the regional plan itself before handing it back over to Joel to tell you about the proposed goals, strategies, and actions. So just a really quick reminder. So this for those of you who may not already be familiar, a fair housing plan is typically a 5-year plan designed to promote meaningful actions to overcome historic patterns of segregation and promote fair housing choice. The key components of the plan are listed here below. And the thing that's most important to know is that there's been a robust community participation process, an opportunity for dialogue with stakeholders of all kinds, and gathering of qualitative as well as quantitative information, and then tying those, most importantly, into actions to address what those data are showing us. So, and this is important, why we do fair housing planning is to ensure that all residents of Arlington County and throughout metropolitan Washington are connected to high-performing schools, healthy neighborhoods, transportation and job and employment centers, and are living in fully integrative and inclusive neighborhoods. Whereas when we have barriers to those choices, we have neighborhoods and schools excuse me, that may be segregated, limited transportation options that then can negatively impact our transportation system and our environment, and people may be exposed to environmental hazards and living in unhealthy neighborhoods. Excuse me. There are 8 local governments who are collaborating and working together. The Council of Governments is an association of 24, and these are the 8 entitlement jurisdictions that have come together to including Arlington County, 5 jurisdictions in Northern Virginia, the District of Columbia, and then in Maryland, Gaithersburg and Montgomery County. We've also been collaborating with our partnering with our public housing authorities in those respective jurisdictions as well. And then we've had an amazing team also supporting us throughout this process. At HUD, we had a technical assistance provider with Enterprise Community Partners. As I've shared, we've had our lead in drafting this plan has been the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. The Urban Institute was the lead on collecting quantitative data and doing the initial analysis. Ochoa Urban Collaborative was the lead for our community engagement process. We've also had a community advisory committee that has been working with us throughout this process since the very beginning, and they've been helping to both provide guidance and input to the local governments, as well as serve as a bridge to residents who might not otherwise be comfortable sharing their experience with local governments. And these are regionally serving organizations that work with people impacted by fair housing choice. This has been a multi-year planning process, but it's also been a plan that's been many years in the making. The last time the region came together to work on a regional fair housing plan was in 1997. And we were all set to begin this process initially back in 2018, when unfortunately there were some changes at the federal level that caused us to a little bit of a delay. But fortunately, all of the local governments came together and determined that this was a worthy process to engage in together. And so in 21, we kicked off officially with the our consultant team and began a data and collection analysis through phase 1 with Urban Institute, then built on those findings to then go out into community and work on the sort of more qualitative side with workshops, focus groups, surveys, and interviews. And then the final phase that we've been in, led by the Lawyers Committee, which is to synthesize all of this information and put it into a draft plan, which is here for your consideration today. So I just want to share a couple of things about the data that were gathered for Arlington County specifically. This is demographics. None of this was probably a surprise to sort of any of you here, but certainly this is, they have shifted since 1990. And here you can see how those demographics have changed in Arlington relative to the region. And in particular, noting that the Asian Pacific Islander population has grown most significantly in Arlington County. Among people who don't speak English as the first language, Spanish is the most prevalent. And from 2015 to 2019, Arlington County's population of residents with limited English proficiency actually declined by 15%. And then you can see, hopefully here on your screen, I'm just going to move this around, that El Salvador is the most common country of origin for those not who are foreign born who live in Arlington County now. Some other data points that have informed the goals and strategies for Arlington County include poverty rates. And before I show this map, it's just important to note that in 2019, one person, the poverty levels meant an income of just under $12,500 per year, and $25,750 for a 4-person family. And the areas that are shaded in darker colors show higher shares of people living in poverty. So this is a map of Arlington County. Only 5 tracts in the southern and western parts of the county have poverty rates of 15 to 20%. And median rent by census. This median, of course, is that this is represents the rent that is at the middle. So half of the rents in Arlington were for more of this amount, and half are for less. And here on this next map, the darker areas that are shaded represent higher costs. So this shows the 3 census tracts in Arlington County had median rents above $3,500 a month or more. And 40% of the tracts have median rents of $2,000 or more. So again, nothing that's probably a surprise to you, but the rents, housing rents in Arlington are quite high. And then I'm gonna, before I hand it over, I'm just to Joel to walk you through the proposed goals and strategies. I just want to make a few brief points that there are 7 goals and strategies that are shared. These are goals that will be implemented locally by Arlington County, as well as the other 7 jurisdictions. And again, these were informed by this really comprehensive multi-year planning process. And in addition to these 7 shared regional goals, some jurisdictions have goals that are specific to their communities, and Joel's going to walk you through those that Arlington has selected for their implementation process as well. And the reason that these goals are limited, the shared goals are limited, were to choose those ones that were most likely to have the greatest impact. Rather than having lots of goals, we chose ones that, fewer goals that we thought might have the greatest possibility of moving the needle for fair housing choice in metropolitan Washington. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Joel to walk you through the next part.
Great. Thank you, Hillary. So yeah, the first goal, which applies to Arlington, as well as its neighboring jurisdiction, is increase the supply of housing that is affordable to families with incomes at 60% of area median income or below in the region, particularly in areas that have historically lacked such housing. Some of the strategies that we are all committed to working on together are listed here. The first one, lower the income targeting of housing affordable to people with incomes of 80% of area median to 60% and below in order to address the chronic housing shortage for low-income individuals and families. Second, provide low-interest loans to single-family homeowners and grants to homeowners with households incomes up to 80% of the area median income in order to develop accessory dwelling units with affordability restrictions on their property. Lastly, on this one, use local government financing and regulatory tools. This could include things such as bonds, real estate tax, transfer taxes, inclusionary housing, as of right accessory dwelling units, and public lands set aside for affordable housing. So next slide. In addition to the strategies shared previously, Arlington County has committed to take additional actions that work toward this shared goal. The first recommendation is to continue to encourage developers to exceed. Hillary, can you go to the next slide there? Thank you. The first one is to encourage developers to exceed the required number of affordable accessible units in a range of sizes and types when development occurs. What we've been seeing is demand for affordable accessible housing units often exceeds supply. Persons with disabilities are more likely to live below the poverty line than persons without disabilities. It is therefore recommended that Arlington County continue to support and encourage the development of accessible units. Second, deepen affordability of affordable housing. The data shed light on the need to better match our affordable housing efforts to the needs of the community. And as such, we'll be looking for every opportunity to provide deeper affordability to meet the needs of households with incomes under 40% of the area median income. So this could include providing incentives for the inclusion of extremely affordable housing units that are funded by the county, or when projects seek refinancing through the county, incorporate adjustments to the affordability covenants to increase the share of those units dedicated to lower affordability levels. Also exploring mechanisms to reduce county fees and related infrastructure costs for 100% affordable developments. Provide incentives or low interest loans for homeowners who rent their accessory dwellings, as was mentioned on the previous slide. And lastly, we're undertaking a new homeownership study that would take a step back from our homeownership programs to really develop clear goals for our approach for homeownership and to rethink how best to achieve those defined outcomes. The homeownership program should serve as a continual program delivery, intended to educate, guide, and assist moderate income Arlingtonians along the path to sustained homeownership. This will include reviewing existing homeownership programs and exploring additional programs to support prospective first-time home buyers and existing low and moderate income homeowners as well. Next slide. So the second goal is to reform zoning and land use policies to expand access to fair housing choice by increasing the development, geographic distribution, and supply of affordable housing. The first strategy is to increase inclusionary zoning incentives for creating on-site affordable housing and increase fees in lieu of providing on-site affordable housing. Next is to adopt affordable housing overlay zones to increase the amount of land or developments that meet robust affordability criteria are allowed as of right. Lastly, incorporate a fair housing equity analysis into the review of significant rezoning proposals and specific plans. Next slide, for Arlington specific, consider new land use and housing policies to expand the supply of missing middle housing in forms limited or non-existent in Arlington's current housing stock. So the county board, as you're probably well aware, has authorized public hearings in March on proposed zoning ordinance and general land use plan amendments related to the missing middle housing study. The board will hold its public hearing and consideration during its regular March meeting. Also looking at initiating a zoning study to examine alternatives to the current definition of family in the zoning ordinance. In response to the changing composition of families and households, the county will consider changes to the zoning ordinance to allow for a broader definition of family and household for occupancy purposes. These changes will allow for non-traditional families, extended families, and unrelated individuals to live together to reduce their housing costs and, in some cases, more efficiently access services. Also, the data showed that a high percentage of older households are cost burdened and highlights the increasing needs for housing affordability for older households. While older adults are welcome in all committed affordable housing, developments targeted specifically to seniors could focus greater attention on their needs. The recommendation here is to initiate a study to examine how an affordability requirement could be structured within the Arlington County zoning ordinance for senior housing projects approved via site plan. Next slide. Goal 3 is implement preservation policies designed to preserve affordable housing and prevent displacement with a goal of no net loss of existing affordable rental units. The regional strategy that relates to Arlington is to track affordable housing developments and expiring subsidy contracts, and to really adopt a proactive approach program to prioritize resources for the preservation of that housing. The next slide, specific to Arlington, we are going to periodically reevaluate the real estate tax relief program targeted to seniors and disabled homeowners in regards to deferrals versus exemptions, asset and income limits, owners' housing costs, and property value to preserve home ownership for the most vulnerable. Also explore reopening the Housing Choice Vouchers primary waiting list in order to solicit new income eligible households seeking rental subsidy supports. This federal subsidy is targeted to low income and extremely low income households through a deep rental subsidy. Also develop a proposal for the review of the housing grant program eligibility and maximum allowable rents. Really conduct an evaluative review of the housing grants program to identify the program's effectiveness in meeting the housing needs of extremely low income households and to develop possible program adjustments. And last, consider developing a program to provide financial and technical support to low and moderate income homeowners for small repairs, estate planning, taxes aging in place, and emergency relief. Next slide. So goal 4 is increase the number of homeowners in the region and reduce inequities and discriminatory practices that limit homeownership opportunities by members of the protected classes. Regional strategies include increased homeownership opportunities for low and moderate income members of protected classes by ensuring affordable housing set-asides and new developments offer homeownership as well as rental, supporting first-time homebuyers by expanding financial literacy programs and homebuyer education, and using innovative homeownership models such as cooperatives and community land trusts. And support current homeowners as well with protected characteristics, including racial and ethnic minorities, people with disabilities, and seniors through increasing fundings for repair, rehab, and renovation programs and products, expanding programs to provide energy efficient improvements to lower utility costs. Next slide, goal 5 is to protect the housing rights of individuals and strengthen fair housing education. Regional strategies include reduced barriers to accessing rental housing by eliminating application fees for voucher holders and encouraging landlords to follow HUD's guidance on the use of criminal backgrounds in screening tenants. Pilot a right to counsel program to ensure legal representation for tenants in landlord-tenant proceedings, and expand and increase support for fair housing outreach, education, and enforcement. Next slide is specific to Arlington. We want to test for housing discrimination based on disability status and at least one of the fair housing tests in the next 5 years, as well as continue tests for housing discrimination based on race and national origin. Testing is a method to determine whether or not a home seeker is treated differently in their search for housing. Second, provide education and outreach to potential first-time homebuyers about fair housing law using HUD certified trainers, homebuyer education, and credit repair education. Third, make the fair housing provisions in the county human rights ordinance consistent with the Fair Housing Act of 1968 and Virginia's fair housing law, including adding source of income as a protected class, and explore becoming a substantially equivalent fair housing assistance program partner with the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And lastly, reduce language barriers when seeking housing services, ensuring that marketing materials for county-funded programs about available affordable units are available in specific languages based on consumer needs. Also increase collaboration with partners to facilitate education of residents in the most prevalent non-English languages. Next slide is goal 6, which is to increase community integration and reduce housing barriers for persons with disabilities. This includes prioritizing home and CDBG funds, which is our federal funding, for developments that include permanent supportive housing units, negotiating project-based voucher contracts for a portion of affordable units and inclusionary developments, and set aside a portion of those project-based vouchers for permanent supportive housing, advocating for public housing authorities to adopt admissions preferences for individuals with disabilities who are institutionalized or at risk of institutionalism, and advocate for new multifamily developments with public funds to have at least 10% of the total units accessible to persons with mobility disabilities and at least 4% accessible for persons with hearing or visual disabilities. Next slide for Arlington. We want to ensure that all accessible units in future committed affordable housing developments provide the same features as standard units. Accessible units should not be qualitatively different from standard units in the same building. Any in-unit amenity provided to tenants, such as in-unit laundry, shall be provided, and accessible units in these amenities shall also comply with accessibility standards. Second, develop a rental accessibility modification program and identify funding to provide technical assistance and grants to assist low and moderate income renters with physical or sensory disabilities to complete accessible modifications to their primary residence. And lastly, explore the possibility of entering into a memorandum of agreement with the state's Department of Behavioral Health and Development Services to administrate what's called the State Rental Assistance Program through the Housing Choice Voucher Program. This program is really designed to provide rental assistance to single-person families with developmental disabilities so they have the means to lease private market rental housing that meets their needs. Accessing this state resource will help reduce costs to local programs. Next slide. Goal 7 is expand access and affordability of public transportation for members of the protected classes. Strategies include providing free bus transportation to low-income households and to study and make recommendations to improve and expand bus routes across borders to ensure that members of protected classes can access jobs and employment centers. And the next slide is an additional Arlington goal, that is to increase effectiveness of existing programs to further fair housing. So Hillary, if you can go to the next, thank you. So this includes the review of current metrics for goals and implement an equity analysis with metrics across program areas and develop a plan for mechanisms for collecting reliable demographic data on residents of committed affordable housing. So the county does not currently have a reliable mechanism for collecting this information on residents of committed affordable housing beyond just household income. So in order to better understand who is being served by committed affordable housing, the county will need to engage with homeowners of committed affordable housing to develop an effective mechanism for collecting demographic data on our committed affordable residents. This would include age, race, ethnicity, gender, and household size. This information is really essential to evaluate the county's affordable housing efforts using an equity lens. Secondly, the existing Affordable Housing Investment Fund policy does affirmably further fair housing choice by having the goal of not further concentrating low and moderate income households. The current funding criteria for investment includes a geographic distribution category. However, given Arlington's low poverty rate, there are no racially or ethnically concentrated areas of poverty as defined by HUD, but we could potentially overlook areas in need. So the county is looking at a modified definition, which is where the non-white population of a census tract is reduced from 50% to 46% or higher, and the poverty rate is reduced from 40% to at least 15%. So it is recommended to include the modified racially and ethnically concentrated areas of poverty, either as a component of geographic distribution category or a separate category in the existing financial policy when new committed affordable projects are considered. I will now turn it back over to Hillary to close out the presentation.
Thanks, Joel. I think we want to just share a few final points with you that we hope you'll remember before providing your insights into these draft proposed actions. First of all, this is a plan for Arlington County, but it's also a plan for the region, and its impact will be felt in other parts of the country, as HUD has been looking to the work that we've been doing to help inform the future of fair housing planning. Furthermore, I want to make sure everyone is clear that that the rationale behind regional coordination is to improve and leverage the work that's happening at the local level so that it can be more effective given limited resources. Obviously, this is changing historic patterns of residential development and segregation are very challenging to reverse at a local level, but at a regional geography, we can be more effective. And we'd also appreciate your help letting people know about the opportunity to provide input. There is a webpage where you can provide comment, and that's at mwcog.org/fair housing plan. Oops, and I'm sorry, I meant to hit enter for the next slide, not stop sharing. Sorry about that.
No worries.
And just in terms of what's going to happen next, following the close of the public comment period at the end of this month, the plan will be revised, and it will go through a legislative review process by Arlington County, as well as 5 other of the jurisdictions. And then it will be receive final edits and then be sent to HUD. If you need, if there are questions about the plan, you can send an email to fairhousing@mwcog.org or to Joel Franklin directly. If you have a question or you need to request a reasonable accommodations, we have 2 phone numbers listed here at the bottom of your screen. And again, we will take any comment in writing, either through our online form, via our email address. For anyone who is visually impaired, we have a TDD line, or you can send in a comment in hard copy to our office in Washington, D.C. And also here are our here's our contact information. If you have any other questions, be happy to address them as best we can. Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you. Appreciate the full presentation. I will just for commissioners, we'll open up to questions. So if you have any questions, please raise your digital hand. I have a few just to start off with, and 1 or 2 being more procedural oriented, just for context. When the plan is provided, the final version of the plan is provided to Housing and Urban Development. What happens next? What happens then? And in particular, how does regional coordination on execution happen? Through what mechanisms, and how well do the participating jurisdictions coordinate with each other in the execution of developed strategies historically? And that's for anyone, either of you, who could potentially address those questions.
We can, well, I think that I'm happy to just take a quick stab and hand it over to Joel and Diane. And as soon as once it goes to HUD, then we move quickly from planning mode to implementation mode, because right, planning is divine, but to implement is, so planning is nice, but right, to implement is divine. So we move into implementation mode. And then I'll let Joel elaborate on the mechanics. I'd be happy to chime in. Is that through COG we meet? We have regional committees where we meet, and I anticipate that we would continue to coordinate in terms of our strategies going forward.
Sure, and we obviously will continue to coordinate with COG, but it is really up to Arlington to implement these. And so we have a kind of an implementation schedule in our draft goals and strategies. And a lot of these things are part of other efforts as well. And so some of them we've already started working on. Some of them we are anticipating will start in the next year or two. And some are a little bit farther down. That the goal is, these are to be tried to be completed within 5 years. So in every year, we need to report to HUD through it's called our CAPER. I think you maybe are familiar with that. It's our reporting system to HUD on how we are doing, how we are firmly furthering fair housing in Arlington. And so we will be reporting each year on our accomplishments as far as what we've been able to accomplish for the recommendations that get adopted.
I see not quite any questions from commissioners yet, so I will unfortunately keep going. What impact has COVID and changes in both housing needs as well as commercial, new ways of working and decoupling between jobs and or the integration of home and jobs, and maybe the need less to travel to, if you're in Virginia and Arlington, to travel to DC. So maybe folks are moving, greater migration from DC to Virginia or to other parts of the region. Does this report, or not the report itself, but is there any change in housing needs that can be directly attributed to COVID that was identified in the course of putting together this plan?
I think as far as, Arlington, I think we continue to see the need for that lower affordability, especially as people may have a fluctuation in their job. If they're not steadily employed, we need to be cognizant of that and lower our affordability, as well as provide temporary assistance as far as rent to them. But I think that, the biggest thing I think we've probably seen in Arlington, right, is the vacancy rates have gone up a little in the commercial side. So there is some thinking that maybe there's an opportunity there, while expensive and probably a little time intensive, is to convert some of that commercial into residential. So there is some talk about that going on within the county. And Diane, I don't know if you had anything to add that you found within the writing of the plan.
Well, certainly not only, COVID caused a wave of people that became unhoused or marginally housed. And in the plan, as a result, I think you'll see a lot of tenant protections that we've made recommendations about because of the fragility. The sort of COVID highlighted the inequities and fragility of a lot of people And so things like right to counsel and other tenant protections are very intentional, and because of the um, because the exacerbation of how unstable housing that was seen during the COVID crisis.
Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? Well, shoot, I have one more. And then we'll let you all get out of here. Can you talk a little bit about the question is, are the challenges for senior renters, how I think one of the barriers that were identified in the Arlington portion of the report through the research process is limited number of affordable rental unit choices for seniors. And I'm curious, how is that barrier unique for them as compared to lower income folks or folks low income folks or with folks with disabilities? I'm just curious, what are the unique challenges of our seniors in Arlington with respect to the rental market?
Yeah, I don't think it's unique to seniors, but I think what we are seeing is an increase in seniors, right? As more people are nearing, that retirement age and beyond, are there enough options for them to afford to be able to stay in Arlington or the region if they choose? So I think that's the challenge to kind of, and I think that the report did. Diane can speak to this. Did highlight the increase in those numbers that are cost burden through Arlington and the region.
Yeah, and I think that in some regards, it's easier to develop senior housing because some of the NIMBY sentiment is a little reduced for seniors versus regular sort of low income people, particularly families. On the other hand, seniors often have limited mobility, and throughout the region, we really found that there is a lack of accessible housing. So some of the recommendations for people with disabilities are certainly with a mind towards seniors as well, because they're often the same, a similar population. So that was sort of foremost in our minds. And of course, seniors have lower incomes than people that are of working age. So the absolute lack of affordability throughout the region really impacts seniors.
Thank you for that context. I appreciate it. Okay, last call for questions. Going once, going twice. Sold. Well, thank you all so much for coming and for the extraordinary work on this plan. And we will be sure as a commission to, between now and the end of the comment period, share out opportunities and we'll review the plan in detail on our own. So thank you all for coming this evening.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time and your work.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Excellent. No one. Yes, Ryan.
Well, shoot, I had a question. I couldn't find the raised hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. Why didn't you still mute?
I couldn't find it fast enough.
Oh, sorry. I did multiple rounds of.
I know. I was letting you talk, and then I was going to come in with a question, but I guess at this point it's moot. So whatever.
Would you at least like to share the question on the record, and we can see if we can follow up?
Well, if you want to, that's fine. I would just like to say, as a developer who's working on a project right now that will have an affordable unit component down in Alexandria, first of all, NIMBYism has no bounds. So I highly disagree with that last assertion about senior housing projects having less opposition. In fact, I've done senior housing projects in different parts of the country. In some cases, it's more, there's more opposition to it because it's seen as almost like like a congregate care facility with nursing stuff that people don't necessarily want in their neighborhood. So I actually disagree with that from a practical level. The other thing I would say is that, again, with a project that is trying to break ground right now, and we have an affordable housing component, it's a very nice goal for government to try to meet affordability, targets in development of new product. But, and I know this is not an uncommon thing for a developer to say, if you want to lower the price of something, you have to increase the supply, because I don't see the demand for housing going down. And yet the cost, I can tell you that the cost to provide housing is going way, way up. And that means that, we have experienced a 35% hard cost increase in the last 18 months on our project, and I'm not sure it'll go. And there are lots of other projects that are being shelved because of the time and expense that's involved in getting projects like this built. And I'm not suggesting that appropriate oversight is not important. It absolutely is. But I mean, it has taken us 3 years. This is a deal in Alexandria, so it's not even in this jurisdiction, but it applies in Arlington too. It's taken 3 years to get through the requisite approvals. And depending on where we are in the phase of the project, every month costs us between $100,000 and $250,000 in carry costs. And so basically, that's the cost of a unit every 2 to 3 months. And so if they want to encourage more affordable housing and to try to make these deals pencil, they really, really have to focus on an efficient approval process, because I can tell you that otherwise these deals will not be financed and they will not get built.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that perspective, and I think there's some reporting earlier today in Arlington challenges around permitting. So I think and approvals. So I think a challenge throughout the jurisdictions covered by the plan. And apologies for not seeing your hand in time. Okay, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is the approval of the February meeting minutes. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes or any corrections to the minutes as necessary. Might I, any changes or corrections? Otherwise, might I?
I move to approve the minutes.
Love it.
Ryan seconds.
We have a second. All those in favor, please indicate with a audible aye.
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 All those opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? The meeting minutes are approved unanimously. We will move on to, I'm going to flip the order in the interest of not talking for a little bit. So if we could proceed into subcommittee reports, and then I will provide some updates from the chair. Which of our illustrious subcommittees would like to report it out first?
If you don't mind, I can go first. I'm going to run out of time at 8:30.
Excellent. Please do.
Okay. Is it possible for me to share my screen?
Yes, you can just go ahead and upload.
There
Okay.
should be a square with a little upward facing triangle.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, I don't know if you guys can see that or not.
Yep, I can.
Yep.
I'm gonna zoom in maybe here too. So the outreach subcommittee met a couple weeks ago. Kirit and Matt and myself, and Hector facilitated the meeting. So the idea behind that meeting was to try to come up with some content around this proposed informational flyer that we'd like to see distributed to tenants, whether on a voluntary basis by landlords or a required basis by landlords. And, the things that we talked about in general that we thought would be a benefit to tenants who may not know where to go for various resources, depending on what their issue is, was essentially, some kind of contact section that for various, groups and departments within the county and other resources which could answer questions for them potentially. So obviously we came up with the Housing Division, Department of Human Services, Code Enforcement, and of course the TLC. We're open to other resources that we believe, that the commission might feel should, we should provide contact information for those groups. So this was just kind of a start. And then we got into kind of a frequently asked questions, sort of format, and the, that might address some common questions that renters have, whether it's about, how do I get information on the VRLTA, or how do I, what happens if I'm having a problem with my lease, whether it's I can't pay my rent or, things like that. What do I do about, other common lease related issues like noise complaints and things of that nature. So you can see the questions that we kind of came up with here. And the idea was to kind of provide, links or resources where you would go for these sorts of things. And in most cases, these questions or the resources that might answer these questions already exist, somewhere online. But to be candid, they're kind of buried. I think Matt was pointing out that there's not even a single link. If we wanted to give someone a URL to any of these resources, it would be about this long, and maybe probably too long to include on a flyer. So it seems like that there are it might be a more simplified way to to communicate to tenants who live in Arlington where they might find information on these various resources that might be able to answer their questions or address their problems. So this was just kind of a content brainstorming exercise. I'm happy to send this out. I did send it before the meeting to Rolda and you all, to Chris, and I copied the other outreach subcommittee members. But to the extent that the entire commission wants to look at this and maybe provide some additional input, I think we would welcome that. There are actually a fairly good amount of resources available online, but getting to them, they're not publicized per se. You'd have to go to the county website, kind of dive several pages deep into either the housing division or wherever. If this kind of flyer, not this format, but, a very attractive kind of graphically designed flyer with links and phone numbers and things like that were available, I think that, including information on what the TLC does and when, so you'll see that down here at number 4, when we meet and that sort of thing. I think making these resources more accessible and publicized, could solve a lot of issues and maybe even prevent some, to the extent that, we're worried about evictions and things like that. So, and then the last thing, the asterisk at the bottom here, was Hector pointed out that it might be worth our time, since we are the Tenant Landlord Commission, that we might want to do something similar for small landlords who, might have problems with, tenants, or what do I do if my tenant isn't paying, or, be a resource not just for the tenant side, which I think we spend most of our time as a commission on, but also for small landlords who are, property owners and, might benefit from, some direction in terms of county resources for, for landlords as providers of housing in the county. So that's kind of the summary. I think what I'd like to see is if we'd like to try to finalize at least some big picture concepts and get some input from commission members, to the extent that a topic, big picture topic on here is not represented, that they think should appear on something like this. And, and then I'd asked Rolda specifically in the email I sent before the meeting about how we would, kind of start to design, the look of a flyer. And again, the idea here is to have a single page, front and backs, English on one side, Spanish on the other, but otherwise identical on a single page, and to produce a PDF that could be, either published online in a very easy to find spot, emailed out to landlords so they can provide it either on a voluntary or mandatory basis with their, their their tenant move-in packages. And then of course, if somebody wanted to print out, a few of these to have at the county office building, if somebody walked in, they needed a hard copy, that's fine. But we're not talking about, some major printing exercise of 15,000 flyers that would get sent through the mail. That's not the point here. This is an electronic thing. And if landlords wanted to provide this in a hard copy, they're welcome to print off a copy at their printer. Kind of like what's required with the recycling flyers that are required now. So what I'd really like to do is get some input on this and then move forward into kind of a design phase to see what we can come up with, and then obviously have that be reviewed by the commission as well.
Awesome. When we will get the flyer circulated, or the this overview circulated to the full commission. I'm curious when. Oh, that is disconcerting. Stop sharing your screen, Ryan.
Sorry.
No worries. It's a conception. When would you like feedback from the full commission, and what is the best way to provide it?
I think if people just emailed with kind of bullet points, I don't think doing if they wanted to email me back and maybe me and I don't know what the procedures are here since it's public stuff, but I know that we got to stay clean there with respect to communication. We don't want to constitute a public meeting or something like that unauthorized. So if people want to respond to me, I can gather those things together. I think that's allowed.
Yes,
as long
I think if they email just you and include Rolda, so there's a record of it. But then, yeah, we try to avoid conducting a meeting, which I think is defined as some sort of simultaneous communications back and forth. So I think just to
Right.
you and Rolda, and then perhaps Rolda, you can, or Ryan, then you'll have bullets. And I think if all commissioners could commit to reviewing the outline when you receive it, and even if your note to Ryan is this looks great, but otherwise provide any additional topics, feedback, suggestions. And then did you give a date? Oh, I think deadlines help everyone focus the mind.
I would say Matt or Curate, do we have another outreach subcommittee meeting on the books?
Oh, I thought that was the 22nd of this month, if I'm not mistaken, March 22nd.
Okay, well, we may need to either push that back, because I think having another meeting without feedback from the commission would probably be not super productive. I'm out of the country. Actually, it can't be the 22nd. I'm out of town. So I'm out of town the last 2 weeks of the month. So if we can get feedback back, by like April 1st or, whatever that is, April 2nd, 3rd, whatever that first Monday of April is.
April 3rd.
That would be ideal.
Okay.
And then
Great.
Curate and Matt, I guess I'll have to reach out because I'm traveling. I got work travel, and then we're actually going to travel for spring break. So I apologize if somehow that got mixed up in the scheduling.
Yeah, I think we could probably move it to April, and just have it be our regular scheduled meeting in April and be good with that, and we still be on the timeline that we want to be on.
Yeah.
And that gives people a little bit more time to review and send us feedback. So I don't see an issue with that. If that works for everybody.
Okay, we can coordinate that offline with Hector in terms of a date, because I know notice needs to be given. Did you want to add anything, or did Curate want to add anything to what I was talking about with respect to the outline? I didn't mean to monopolize what we talked about.
No, I think you covered a lot of it. One of the things I did want to add was possibly compiling a lot of those different links into one place, like a that would be just a single link, like a link tree sort of system might be worth it, so that people, when they have those FAQs or they're looking for something specific, they have one place they can go to that is related to all these things. Because, as Ryan had mentioned, one of the things I did note was like there's not one single tenant like hub on the website that I can find, right, that has all these different things. So that's sort of one of those things that I was kind of kicking around. So that might be a way to work around the issues that we have with the lengthy URLs, and just a way to make it a little bit more accessible for people who are not going to spend too much time, searching through websites and web pages and all that.
Yep. And I think that's something we can put links on the PDF. I mean, once this becomes a PDF, you can link from a PDF, right? But secondly, I mean, it could be just a place on on the TLC page, you provide like you said, just a list of links, like a link tree or whatever.
Yeah, list of all the links, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, and well, I'll just put this out there that it may be helpful for the subcommittee coordinating through Hector to speak with, anyone who's I don't know how the website is maintained, or the TLC page in particular, or if that's directly updated by Hector and Rolda, but certainly, hopefully, we can leverage our own page to be a home for this document, including the links as well. Okay, thank you.
One more thing. There were two questions that are kind of open questions, I think, for Rolda. So one, it pertains to kind of like how something like this gets designed, right? Like whether the county does that internally, or whether we have a little bit of money to hire a third-party graphic designer. Like when the county wants to design a flyer, how does that get done? So that's something that we don't know. And then I think the other open question is whether or how or when we want to approach our county board liaison with this idea. I mean, I think it should be pretty fully baked and say, hey, look, we have this, and we'd be interested in having you guys consider making this some kind of mandatory thing, but in the meantime can be optional. So those are two questions that I think we still don't really know for certain how that might go.
I won't put it. Oh, sorry. Who's that?
No, I was just about to say that there are a couple of things at play here. That the county is actually, our housing division, through our communication staff, is actually working on some of this stuff to make the website much more friendly. And actually, Jennifer is on, and she can add some information here.
Hi, thanks for that, Ryan. It's interesting to hear what you guys are working on. Great minds think alike. I think we all agree that the county website, it got revamped a couple of years ago, and I think it made it less user-friendly. It's got a better search engine, but it's really hard to find stuff. So that is something that's on our work plan, and our comm staff is working with us to help make it more user-friendly. As far as documents, I mean, as you said, we have a ton of information on there. It's just not easy to find. It's not necessarily user-friendly or accessible. So we do actually, I think, don't quote me on this, but here I am being recorded. I think we actually have some money this year to produce some, nice brochures, some nice glossy things that we don't usually have. And so what we've been kind of talking about is putting together a packet of a lot of this information that you're talking about, related to tenant rights and responsibilities, but also related to things like, code enforcement. I think you mentioned that, or public health. What do you do if you have pests? Like all those kinds of things, put it in a packet and actually distribute it to all of our committed affordable properties. So we're hoping to be able to do that. And what we were talking about is when we get a little more fully baked, we would love to come either to a full commission meeting or to one of your subcommittee meetings and kind of put our heads together and make sure we're hitting on the stuff that y'all think we need to be hitting on, and maybe some strategies for outreach.
Yeah, I think
so. It's actually kind of exciting. Like we never have money for this stuff, and I think we may be able to do that. And so actually print stuff and make some nice materials.
And I Jennifer, I don't think you were part of the discussion when we talked about this originally, but the notion that, I mean, so as a small landlord, right, I have to distribute some stuff to our tenants, and two of the required documents, one is the county recycling program, and the other is the statewide Virginia tenant and landlord rights and responsibilities. So we provide that with all of our leases, and we provide the recycling stuff annually like we're asked to. And it's not that hard to do. And so, but what the difference there is that rather than create a big packet of stuff, like the simpler and shorter and kind of more concise, the better. I think you're going to get better uptake from tenants. I mean, if you slap the handbook on their, on their kitchen counter in their apartment, they're going to like put it in the trash can or whatever. So, something that is like a single page resource was what we were aiming for. But more than being available on a website somewhere where the resident has to go seek it out, we're looking to try to push this one-page resource out into kind of the renter community. And whether it's the committed affordable or really market-wide, I think that was kind of the direction we were headed. Whether it's on a voluntary basis or a mandatory basis, that's up to the county board. But I mean, look, if I've got to print out 2 other piece documents and include it with my leases, what's an extra page, And if that creates a more educated renter that doesn't have to come to me for stuff as a landlord, I'm all for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent points.
Awesome. I'm excited for greater collaboration on this point, and it sounds like it's been a productive month. I want my acting chairmanships to be known for being on time. And so with 15 minutes remaining, I want to make sure we have time for our second subcommittee. So I'm going to turn things over to Emily.
Hi, I think we'll be pretty quick. So this last meeting, we had Hector and also Saul from Bugada share about the different calls and like the categories really of calls that they get from tenants and landlords and what questions they are addressing, what they're working on, to give us a good idea of, for the alternate dispute resolution committee, which is the subcommittee that we're on, what kind of issues we would focus on. I think my takeaway, and I'll ask Kristen if she wants to add anything from that, is that the county is well equipped in the information going off of everything that we just discussed to share with tenants and to help with those next steps. And the role that the TLC can really play is helping the landlords show up and doing, I think it all relates to like what we said with the outreach committee to let landlords know what we're doing as well. I really liked, Ryan, that part that you shared of not just the tenant information, but the landlord information is important. So next subcommittee meeting where it's going to be more discussion based, where we can dive into what, now that we have a good understanding of the kinds of questions that are being asked and what the support that the residents need, what can we do to help that communication between tenants and landlords?
Awesome.
Kristen, anything you want to add?
I think the only thing I wanted to add is that we have to be sure that we focus our drive to help with dispute resolution to a very narrow field, because otherwise, we're going to be talking about pests, or we're going to be talking about unhappy residents in general, or we're going to be talking about rent increases and evictions, and so much of that it's actually directed by the VRLTA. So I don't know that we necessarily want to get involved in mediating that. What I heard from Saul was one of the things that his residents, the people he speaks to, are most unhappy about in general is the lack of good communication, the lack of perceived respect, and not listening. And that is something, that I don't think that's necessarily dispute resolution, but I think that if we came from the Landlord Tenant Commission and went out to landlords who were perceived as not being good listeners and not being respectful, and let them know that we as representatives of the county and a sort of bipartisan group want you to hear from us what we're hearing, maybe that would help. So I'd like us to sort of focus on that a bit, because I think so many of the other issues that Hector and Saul touched on during our meeting are bigger than what we can handle and are already really addressed to the VRLTA. But that was a long answer. Sorry about that.
No apologies. Appreciate that context. Awesome. Okay, thank you. Apologies, checking the chat. Okay, I have a couple of brief updates, and then Rhoda and other staff, if there are any announcements, and then we'll wrap up. So just a few updates. One, a few weeks ago had an opportunity to attend a community meeting at the Serrano, invited by the county, I think through Rhoda's coordination. It was a community meeting for residents. With many of the property managers and on site. Attended. It was advertised well, but had maybe about 10 or 12 residents come to talk about some of the more recent challenges that we've been hearing about. My big takeaway was that the elevators were sort of the bigger issue in the last couple of months. And was able to get some additional context. For example, I think we heard that there was a delay in beginning repair work on the elevators. Fuller context, it appears that the property manager had awareness of on the same day that the elevators failed, they had folks out, but they actually had to build a part, which took, I believe, 9-10 days. Now, even though that might be reasonable that there needed to be time for repairs, the result of that was folks, particularly elderly folks in the building, having to climb multiple flights of stairs, or even in some cases, folks being afraid to come down because they were afraid to go back up. And while there were some resources to help folks get packages up and things like that, or groceries, it was really challenging. But I think the consensus was that it highlights the age of the building itself and the need for a broader effort to renovate or redevelop, and that's going to require funds. And so I did find management responsive, at least in the room. That's otherwise what I would expect in a community meeting they call. I think the final thing is, and I think we heard a little bit of it ourselves in public comment, but there was some discussion around folks coming to property management and we're told, oh, we've got lawyers. I did ask that question of representatives of the property manager and property management. It was denied outright. And I did note that seems like a very specific type of allegation, but they denied it. So I think, county's deeply committed. I think we'll be hearing from them later this year on broader CAF efforts. We have, I think David in his email has made it clear that, our goal is to get tenants who come to us from the Serrano who are highlighting issues of public health or safety, get them connected with the county through the right resources. But it was a good, I think, session to go out and visit. And I've asked that next time there's another community building at the meeting, community meeting at the building, that commissioners be let know so that we can get out into the community in some of these cases. And I think that it was really valuable. Second, quick update is tomorrow. Right now, the board is conducting a set of work sessions related to the budget. We will have a presentation on the budget. Check me next month, Rolda, or May. I can't remember where exactly we landed.
It's going to be in April.
April, excellent. So we'll have a session from the department on the housing component of the budget. Tomorrow, though, the county there will be a county board working session. I'll represent the commission with respect to the budget, just to speak on some of the priorities identified in the budget. I do encourage you all to take a look. If you don't want to, the budget itself is 1,000 pages total, but helpfully the county manager includes a section on housing affordability that outlines the investment. For example, the county is investing about $76 million in housing affordability efforts this year. Direct housing assistance as well, affordable housing supply. So I encourage you all to take a look at that as well before our housing meeting, and I'm sure we'll get that out and about to folks. Rolda, do you have any updates or announcements for us?
I just have one announcement. I sent out a link this afternoon for the Housing Commission meeting tomorrow. And that may be something that members might be interested in, because that's where the Serrano, as Chris just reported, that will actually be handled tomorrow at the Housing Commission meeting. Perhaps AHC representatives as well as advocates and maybe tenants. So this is sort of like the follow-up to what had happened a couple months ago. So that's taking place tomorrow. I think that was all. The other thing is, as you might have noticed, you've been receiving fairly regular weekly reports, it looks like, on eviction reports from Legal Services of Northern Virginia. So, just let me know if you want to continue to receive those. And perhaps at some point we can have them talk with us if, the commission is interested in getting more of that information. I think we had some attendees on here this evening.
No, I
That's all I have.
emails, so.
That's what I have.
And any comments? I want to say for the good of the order, but that's old days. But any other commissioner updates, comments, questions, things left unsaid?
Yes, I have a comment. Vice Chair Chris, thank you for your comments on Serrano. Yeah, that's what we usually find. They outright deny the items that are reported by the residents, but I'm glad that the TLC is actively participating in the tenant meetings that I look forward to, and to see what happens. We have to get accurate information, so I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And Brigada was there as well, which I appreciated too. So, as well as folks from the county. So yeah, but I appreciate that. Okay, well, look at this, 8:25. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Can I make a motion to recognize Chris Wimbush's timing efficiency? Can we do like a, I don't know, can we do some kind of like, I don't know, it's not memorial because you're not dead, but some kind of some kind of motion that he really ran this thing on time, and I love it.
I appreciate that. No.
But I'll move to adjourn, having made that comment.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
I second.
Excellent.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have
I'm
it.
a.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Stay
Good
well.
night, all.
Appreciate it.